That morning felt just like any other. Sunlight streamed lazily through the kitchen window, and I was humming without even realizing it while stirring sugar into my coffee. The smell of fresh brew filled the room, comforting and familiar. Then I heard Marcia's footsteps. Something about the way she walked, hesitant, almost dragging, made me glance up. She cleared her throat, her voice carrying a nervous little tremor as she spoke. "Oh, Mrs. Sarah, the young woman from yesterday left an earring on your bed. I placed it on the nightstand for you." Her words sliced through me like a shard of glass. My hand slipped, and the spoon clattered against the cup, splashing a few drops of coffee onto the counter. For a moment, I just stood there frozen, my pulse roaring in my ears. Did I hear her right? An earring? On my bed? Left by some young woman? My stomach twisted so violently it felt like the floor had shifted under me. I forced myself to look at her, my eyes narrowing ever so slightly. My voice, when it finally came out, was calm. Too calm, the kind of calm that masks fire. "Young woman from yesterday? Marcia. What young woman?" The question came out like a test, as though I wanted to trap her in her own words. Inside, though, I already felt something breaking. Marcia's face drained of color. Her hands fumbled with the rag she was holding, twisting it as though she could wring the tension out of the air. I'm sorry," she stammered, her eyes darting nervously toward the floor. "I thought you already knew." That apology only made my heart pound harder, because if she thought I knew, then it meant this wasn't just some slip. It was real. I swallowed back the lump rising in my throat. Every instinct screamed at me to demand answers, to shout, to let the hurt burst out in a flood. But instead, I smiled. A smile so brittle it could shatter at any second. I thanked her with a voice steadier than I felt, though my hands trembled as I set the spoon down. She looked relieved, almost grateful, as if I'd given her permission to pretend nothing had happened. But inside me? My chest burned, my mind spinning so fast it made me dizzy. Coffee no longer smelled like comfort. It smelled bitter, suffocating. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself, feeling my nails bite into the wood. If there was an earring on my bed, then something was already unraveling in my marriage. And I wasn't sure yet if I wanted to pull at that thread, or if I had the strength not to. As soon as Marcia turned back to her work, I stayed rooted in place, staring blankly at the coffee cup like it could give me answers. The sound of the spoon settling inside the cup echoed louder than it should have, like a reminder of how easily everything can slip. My chest felt tight, each breath shallow, my mind replaying her words over and over. The young woman from yesterday. Who was she? How long had this been going on? I tried to steady myself, running through the last few weeks in my head. Ted's late nights, his vague explanations, the way he'd been more distracted than usual. Had I brushed it all off too easily? Had I been too trusting? The questions churned like poison in my stomach. And suddenly, the house I once considered my safe space felt like unfamiliar ground. Still, I forced myself to carry on, to move my body through the motions as if nothing had cracked. But every step felt heavy, deliberate, like I was pretending to walk in shoes that no longer fit. The earring was waiting upstairs, sitting on my nightstand like a silent accusation. And though I hadn't yet seen it, I already knew it would change everything. I walked upstairs with lead in my legs, each step louder in my head than the last. When I opened the bedroom door, my eyes locked instantly on the nightstand. And there it was, a delicate golden earring, catching the light as though mocking me. My stomach dropped. It wasn't mine. I'd never worn anything like it. The sight of it, small as it was, felt heavier than a stone crushing my chest. I moved closer, my breath uneven. My fingers hovered above it, afraid to touch, afraid it would burn. Picking it up felt like admitting it was real. The smooth metal pressed into my skin, cold and foreign, a stranger's secret lying in the heart of my marriage. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shatter every piece of glass in the room. But instead, I slipped it back where Marcia had placed it, as if putting it down could put my world back together. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the sheets that suddenly felt tainted. My own bed, our bed, was no longer sacred. It was a crime scene, a place where I was made a fool. My heartbeat was frantic, echoing in my ears, and yet I forced myself to stillness. Because if Ted thought I didn't know, then I still had one thing left: control. That evening, when I heard the door unlock, I felt my entire body tense. Ted walked in, his face bright and casual, carrying the same charm that once melted me. He leaned down, pressing a kiss on my cheek like nothing was wrong, like our lives hadn't just cracked wide open. "Evening, love. How was your day?" His voice was smooth, rehearsed, practiced. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, I saw the mask. The way his eyes darted, the way his smile lingered too long. My lips curled into what I hoped looked like ease. "Ordinary, nothing new." The words came out like honey, sweet but sticky, hard to swallow. I held my tone steady, hiding the storm boiling just beneath. He nodded, completely unsuspecting, pouring himself a drink while humming softly. Watching him, I realized he thought he was untouchable. He believed I was blind, fragile, naive. That smug certainty was almost more painful than the betrayal itself. Because in that moment, I knew. He wasn't just cheating. He was underestimating me. Dinner felt like a performance, every bite of food tasting like ash in my mouth. I kept my eyes on him, studying his movements, his casual jokes, his ease. He thought he was safe. He thought his secret was buried deep enough that I would never dig. My smile didn't falter, but my mind was already racing far ahead of him. Inside, I was boiling. Anger pulsed in my veins, not wild, but sharp, controlled. If he believed he could play me, then I'd let him keep thinking that, for now. I had no intention of giving him the satisfaction of a scene. No yelling, no tears. Not yet. I wanted him comfortable, so his fall would be that much harder when it came. As I cleared the dishes, my hands shook so badly I thought I might drop a plate. But I steadied myself. I told him good night with a soft smile, and as he drifted into sleep beside me, I stared into the dark. My mind wasn't resting. No, my mind was plotting. The next morning, I slipped the earring into my purse like it was contraband. My hands shook as I dialed a number I hadn't used in months. An old friend, a jeweler I trusted. When he picked up, I tried to keep my voice light, casual. "I need you to take a look at something for me." My chest tightened as I placed the little piece of gold on his counter, praying it wouldn't scream the truth I already feared. He lifted it delicately, adjusting his glasses. "Beautiful piece," he murmured, turning it in the light. "Very recent, bought last week. Not cheap either. Came as a pair. I sold it to a woman named Julia." The name landed like a punch. Julia. My stomach flipped, and I had to grip the counter to keep steady. I knew that name. Ted had mentioned it once, offhand, as if she were nobody. I forced a smile, thanked him, and tucked the earring away before he could ask questions. My heart was racing so hard it felt like it might tear through my ribs. Julia. Suddenly, everything was sharper. His late nights, his excuses, his distracted laughs. He hadn't even been careful. And worse, he thought I wouldn't notice. That evening, I set the table for dinner as usual, the routine almost mechanical. Ted walked in, loosened his tie, kissed my cheek, and sat down, humming like nothing was wrong. "Friday, I'll be late. Client dinner," he said, casual, dismissive. His fork clinked against his plate, and I just nodded, folding my napkin neatly in my lap. Of course, I replied smoothly. My voice didn't tremble. Work comes first. I even smiled, like a wife who understood, like a woman who trusted. But inside, my stomach burned with a quiet fire. I thought about Julia, about the earring, about the way his arrogance dripped from every word. He had no idea the walls were closing in. I studied him over the candlelight, every detail suddenly magnified. The way he avoided my gaze for just a second too long. The way his hands fidgeted when I asked harmless questions. He didn't know I was watching. He didn't know I was listening. And he certainly didn't know I was planning. That night, lying in bed beside him, I kept my breathing slow and steady, pretending to sleep. But in my mind, the pieces were rearranging into something dangerous. If Julia was bold enough to leave an earring behind, she wouldn't be hiding for long. And if Ted was arrogant enough to think I'd never find out, then I had the upper hand already. Revenge wasn't just a thought anymore. It was taking shape, step by step. I could feel it building, icy and deliberate, like a current pulling me forward. There was no going back now. He had chosen his secret. I was choosing my silence, for the moment. But silence in my hands would become a weapon. As the night deepened, I turned onto my side, my back to him. I whispered one word to myself, barely audible, like a vow. Friday. He stirred in his sleep, unaware. And in that darkness, I promised myself, his downfall would begin the moment he thought he was safest. Friday arrived, and my hands were steady in a way that surprised even me. I wasn't the trembling woman in the kitchen anymore. I was a strategist, setting the stage for the truth to expose itself. I asked Marcia to stay late, her eyes wide when I explained what I needed. Set the table like before, I told her. Wine glasses, candles, everything as though I were out. She didn't ask questions, but I could see the sympathy in her gaze. As she arranged the scene, I slipped quietly into the guest room, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. The house felt different, charged, almost electric, as though the walls themselves knew a reckoning was coming. My breathing slowed, every sense heightened. The flicker of candlelight in the dining room sent long shadows creeping across the hall, painting the perfect illusion. When Marcia finally left, I was alone in the silence, waiting. The stillness pressed against my skin like a second heartbeat, loud and insistent. Every tick of the clock stretched longer, feeding my anticipation. I sat in the dark guest room, hidden behind the door, and whispered to myself, "Let him bring her. Let him show me everything I already know." Hours later, the sound of the front door unlocking sent a jolt through me. My body went rigid, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles ached. Laughter spilled into the house. Two voices, warm and mocking. His voice, the one I once trusted, wrapped around hers like a secret melody. And then, Julia's laugh, sharp and careless, rang out like glass breaking. They walked in, the click of her heels echoing against the hardwood floor. From my hiding place, I could see the glow of candlelight illuminating their faces. Julia's hand rested easily on his arm, her head tilted back in exaggerated amusement. And Ted. He looked lighter, freer, like the man I hadn't seen in months. But this wasn't freedom. This was betrayal on display. Julia's voice carried across the room, dripping with disdain. "So, she really doesn't suspect anything?" she teased, her tone mocking me even in my absence. My nails dug into my palm, but I stayed silent, recording every word. Ted smirked, his arrogance spilling over. "Sarah? She's too naive. I've got her wrapped around my finger." Hearing it aloud was worse than I had imagined. The man I built my life with reduced me to a fool with a careless smirk. My jaw clenched, but my heart, oddly, felt cold, steady. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was clarity. Every word out of his mouth became another nail sealing his own coffin. I angled the phone, making sure his voice, his smug tone, was crystal clear. The recording pulsed like power in my hand. Julia leaned closer, whispering something I couldn't quite hear, but her laughter followed. They toasted with the wine Marcia had set, like thieves celebrating their prize. And there I was, silent, watching, holding the truth in the palm of my hand. My anger no longer burned wild. It had transformed into something sharper, controlled, like ice forming on still water. I wasn't just a betrayed wife hiding in the dark. I was the storm waiting at the door, and when I finally stepped out of that room, I knew their laughter would freeze in their throats. I stepped out of the shadows before either of them could notice the creak of the floorboard. My phone was still in my hand, its red light blinking like a witness to their betrayal. Ted's laughter stopped mid-breath, and Julia's glass froze halfway to her lips. The look on their faces, priceless. A mix of shock, shame, and the dawning horror that the game was over. Naive? My voice cut the air clean, cold, deliberate. Wrapped around your finger? Their heads whipped toward me, eyes wide. I took one step closer, each heel strike echoing like a gavel in court. Tell me, Ted, was this earring hers? With a flick of my wrist, I tossed the little gold earring, and it landed at Julia's feet with a soft, damning clink. The color drained from Julia's face as she bent slightly, caught between shame and disbelief. Ted turned pale, his lips parting like he could spin this into a story that might save him. But nothing he could say now mattered. His silence was already too loud, his guilt too obvious, and I had no intention of giving him the stage. "Sarah," he started, his voice trembling in a way I'd never heard before. "It's not what you think." But I cut him off with a look sharp enough to slice through his excuse. "Oh, it's exactly what I think," I said, steady, every syllable dripping with venom and calm. I held up my phone, the recording screen glowing like judgment itself. Julia stammered, her confidence shattered. I didn't mean..." Her words collapsed under the weight of my stare. I wasn't interested in her apology, or in her shame. She was a prop in his betrayal, nothing more. My real target was the man who had underestimated me so completely. I pressed my thumb against the screen, sending the recording in one swift, final gesture. "And now," I whispered, meeting Ted's horrified eyes, "it's exactly what the world will know." My message went straight to his boss, his family, his closest friends. Proof, evidence, betrayal carved in his own words. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Ted's face twisted, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. He reached out, but I stepped back, my expression unreadable. For the first time, he saw me clearly. Not the wife he thought was blind, not the woman he thought was soft, but the one holding his downfall in her palm. Julia dropped her glass, the wine spilling across the table like blood seeping into linen. She didn't dare look at me again. Ted muttered something, a plea maybe, but I didn't care enough to hear it. I had already won. The room, once ours, no longer belonged to him. I walked toward the door, my head high, the echo of my heels following me like a victory drumbeat. Behind me, I left the wreckage of their laughter, the ashes of their arrogance. And though my chest still ached, it wasn't pain anymore. It was release. My revenge had only just begun to unfold. Months later, I found myself sitting at a cafe I'd always passed but never entered. The air smelled of roasted beans and fresh pastries, and for the first time in a long time, I could actually breathe without feeling the weight of a secret pressing on my chest. Across from me sat Marcia, her smile warm, her presence no longer that of a housekeeper, but of a friend. Funny how betrayal forges unexpected bonds. She leaned in, her eyes sparkling with a mix of mischief and pride. "You're glowing, Mrs. Sarah," she teased, though now she rarely called me that anymore. It's like you dropped a huge weight off your shoulders. I laughed, genuinely laughed, the sound surprising me. It felt like it came from somewhere deep, somewhere I thought I'd lost. And she was right. I had dropped the weight. No more tiptoeing around his lies, no more second-guessing myself in the middle of the night. For the first time in years, my reflection in the cafe window looked like mine again. My shoulders were straighter, my smile easier. Freedom looked good on me. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring the warmth as it spread through me. I did drop something, I told her softly, my voice carrying a peace I hadn't known before. I dropped him, and everything he thought he could do to me. Marcia chuckled, shaking her head, as if she'd always known I'd come out stronger. Ted had lost more than he ever imagined. His wife, his reputation, his carefully constructed mask. Even Julia, from what I'd heard, didn't stay long after the scandal broke. He was left standing in the ruins of his arrogance, exactly where he deserved to be. And me? I walked away without looking back. It's strange the way revenge feels. People imagine fire and fury, but for me it felt like quiet air after a storm. Not loud, not explosive, just still. Just free. Sitting there with Marcia, I realized I didn't need to shout my victory. I was living it. Marcia reached across the table, touching my hand with that gentle solidarity only women who've seen too much can share. You turned pain into power, she said softly, almost as if she didn't mean for me to hear it. But I did, and it landed in me like truth. I smiled, lifting my cup in a small toast. Ted lost his wife, his reputation, and even his mistress's respect. All because of one careless earring. I let the words linger in the air, not bitter, not angry, just factual. A reminder of how fragile arrogance can be when it underestimates the wrong woman. As I took another sip, the world outside felt brighter, alive with possibilities. I was no longer the woman clutching at a spoon in the kitchen, trembling at a truth too heavy to hold. I was someone new, lighter, freer, and finally in control of my own story. And this time, the story was mine to write.